After nearly 20 years, in 2012, Alton Towers would reuse the iconic Nemesis brand, opening a brand new ride and then just 3 years later closing it for 8 years, for it then to reopen completely out of the blue. This is the history of Nemesis Sub-Terra.
This is Phalanx Control. All civilians are reminded this is a secure military facility. Please be aware, routine weapon checks are now in operation. Phalanx operatives must be obeyed at all times. Power surges are expected for the next 45 minutes. All civilians must be alert to the possibility of electrical discharge. Further announcements will be made when secondary generators come online.
Nemesis at Alton Towers had been and still is an extremely popular roller coaster at Alton Towers. And since its opening in 1994 has captured the imagination of guests and enthusiasts alike, with its amazing theming as Nemesis to its truly incredible theming as Nemesis Reborn. The ride will open to guests in 1994 as the world's second B&M inverted roller coaster after Batman over in the States, and after 30 years of service, closed to make way for a complete retrack and re-theme, keeping the original story of the Nemesis creature but making it more. But the history of that is coming up in a future video. Back to Sub-Terra. In 2011, a large site at the top of Forbidden Valley, which had previously cited Dynamo, a Husk Breakdance 3, and Lava Lump, which was an upcharged climbing wall, was cleared to make way for something new. And as the teaser said, what lies beneath? For a while, nobody really knew what Alton Towers were doing with the space, and because it's an indoor ride, the planning documents that were submitted didn't really reveal an awful lot. With the whole marketing campaign being centred around the whole "what lies beneath" slogan, it was pretty clear to see that this ride would involve going underground. Construction would start in late 2011, which in itself indicated that this of course wasn't going to be a huge indoor roller coaster, but what really was in there, nobody really knew. But in 2012, on opening day, riders were able to face what lies beneath for themselves for the first time. And after a lengthy and rather out there marketing campaign involving contortionists, a 12A rating which was a first for any ride, and some clever video teasers, the public would get their first glimpse into what was the UK theme park's biggest kept secret for years. It would come to light that the attraction was kind of in 3 parts, with the main ride system being in the middle of the experience, involving an ABC rides drop tower, which we had seen already at Blackpool Dungeons and London Dungeons by this point, albeit slightly different. With a pre-show and fake lifts at the start of the experience and a small scare maze at the end of the ride. Now, after the extensive and fear-mongering marketing, labelling the ride as a horror experience, the final product, well, wasn't that. The reviews for Nemesis Sub-Terra were far from beaming, and guests felt shortchanged with the lack of, well, anything when the ride opened. Guests and enthusiasts were far from satisfied on the ride's opening, and Alton Towers would need to pull something from up their sleeve to make this £4.5 million investment worth it. The following year would see several changes to the experience, with the addition of leg ticklers, water sprays, and other special effects within the drop tower portion of the ride. And it received much better praise, but again, the public did not think the ride had lived up to all the marketing that had made it seem like everyone's worst nightmare. However, I will say that I always fought the corner for Nemesis Sub-Terra. Every ride I had on it was fantastic. The final scene, which involved a small scare maze style corridor, would be tweaked and would see the addition of scare actors to further elevate the experience. The ride would continue to operate for 2 more years, up until 2015. And well, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but we all know what happened in 2015. This incident caused endless issues for the park, but had a whole knock-on effect. Budgets were tighter, rides that were too expensive to run were simply shut and forgotten about, with Alton Towers putting 6 rides on the cutting block temporarily. Nemesis Sub-Terra was definitely closed the longest. The area would see no activity or no signs of opening again. And that was until 3 years later. Alton Towers would announce Project 42 for the 2018 Scarefest attraction lineup. And lo and behold, the Scare Maze was to be situated inside of the building of Sub-Terra.
So the fourth and final Scare Maze coming to Scarefest this year will be known as Project 42. It's a brand new attraction coming to the park for this year. I'm very excited to see what it's all about, as there's no heavy details on this just yet. But we can speculate on where it's going to go. I mean, there's been quite a lot of construction taking place on the old Nemesis Sub-Terra show building, which is of course located in Forbidden Valley.
Myself and other enthusiasts were wondering if the ride had been completely gutted and its fate was to be a Scare Maze for the rest of its days. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. What Alton Towers in fact did was build a Scare Maze around the existing theming, scenery and ride system, which for me was a huge surprise to see the ride still standing there after 3 years by this point. There'd been several rumours about what the current state of the ride was, with some whispers saying it had been used as a donor ride for the Blackpool Dungeons drop towers, to people saying it was still fully functional. And well, seeing it firsthand, I think the truth lied somewhere in the middle, with it needing some work but being like 90% there and complete. Project 42 would remain on the Scarefest lineup all the way up until the following year, 2019. And after that, once again, the building was shut off and all our hopes and dreams of maybe seeing Sub-Terra reopen were in tatters again. Out of nowhere in 2022, people started to notice an activity around the ride site, with some bits being taken off, lights being tested. At the start, it was very easy to come to the conclusion that they were simply removing the theming from Project 42 to possibly make way for a new addition to the Scarefest lineup. However, this was not to be the case. Rumours would quickly spread that the ride was to be reopened. With Nemesis' closure ready for the retrap quickly looming at the end of 2022, there would be a rather large gap in the ride lineup. Rumours were quickly put to bed, with Alton Towers announcing that Sub-Terra would in fact finally reopen after 8 years standing dormant. And I've got to say, I was surprised that they decided to recommission this ride after so long. It must have taken some serious work to get it up to scratch after being sat for so long. As has become the theme at Alton Towers with the opening of the Curse at Alton Manor, the resort had once again planned a huge reopening ceremony featuring actors from the adverts really playing into the new Forbidden Valley storyline involving the Phalanx. The ride experience itself hadn't majorly changed. You'd enter the show building into a briefing room and get told the story of the Nemesis egg that had been found, and the guests had been invited to view this completely safe Nemesis egg.
Apologise for that brief interruption. I can assure you that everything is as it should be and is completely under control. And without further ado, it gives me great pride to announce the Phalanx Research Facility. Open.
You'd then enter a fake lift which would transport guests into the lower level where the egg was being kept. After this lift, you'd enter the main viewing area of the egg, with 4 rows of 10 seats surrounding the egg, where the guests would take their seats, the restraints would lower and the ride experience would start. To which once again you were told about the egg and how safe it is, and then the lights would start flickering with the audio glitching. The lights would then go off for a couple of seconds, and then they would come back on and the egg would be cracked and hatched. After this, air cannons would blast guests, alarms would be sounding, and that's when the ride would drop, 20 foot into the lower level, showing a whole nest of Nemesis eggs. The ride would take you back up to the viewing area with air cannons, growling sounds and leg ticklers. And once you'd reached the top level, Phalanx operatives would burst in and order you from the seats to get into yet another fake lift. But this time the walls would buckle, the lights would go out, and the growls from the Nemesis creature would continue. Once the lift doors reopened, you would then enter the final portion of the ride, which is the Scare Maze style exit corridor, featuring 1 or 2 actors in gas masks chasing you out of the building, which I always thought was a fantastic way to end the experience. Now, the ride would receive a similar reception to its opening year. Yes, it was great to have it back, but it wasn't the amazing, thrilling, horror-filled attraction it was always intended to be. However, I was just happy to have another dark ride back in the park, and again, I've always enjoyed it, and found it to be quite intense and chaotic as a whole experience. From the original incarnation, the ride hadn't changed really, with some small tweaks to the lighting, storyline and final corridor, but apart from that, the recipe was still the same. But if it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, unless it's been closed for 8 years. This has been the history of Nemesis Sub-Terra. And once again, if you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe. Let me know if you've got any suggestions for any other attractions you'd like to see be covered. I've got a bit of a backlog lineup of rides I'm going to be covering, so let me know if there's any more that you want me to add to that list. And I'm hoping to release these once a week, and I'm glad you all enjoyed the previous ones, so I shall see you in the next video.